These are earthworm plugs, created when our common earthworm, Lumbricus terrestris, pulls leaves and other vegetable material into the ground. Partly it's plugging the hole to prevent it from being water-filled, but also it's there as nutrient. As it rots down, the earthworm can eat it. It also eats the soil, passing it through its body and removing nutrients from it. So you also get these earth plugs or earth casts coming up. Now, Charles Darwin wrote his last scientific book on this subject of earthworms. He didn't think it would be of great interest, but in fact he received an enormous amount of correspondence regarding the earthworm. He reckoned there are something like 47,000 earthworms per acre, and the soil they bring to the surface is responsible for raising the level of the ground by about 1 inch every 10 years. In fact, he was one of the first people to do research on Stonehenge. He was measuring the levels of the soil and found the substantial movement that buries many historical structures dating from those times in the soil, thereby preserving them, as well as the inevitability of the earth movements. These are the holes of the earthworm where the plugs are removed. In fact, on a very quiet night, if you go out into a lawn, you can actually hear the rustling sounds as the earthworms drag likes of leaves and so on into their holes. They're very selective in the way they drag them down. They drag them down either by the point, the tip of the leaf, or by the stalk. They're very good at recycling materials. Darwin observed that cinders and lime spread on the soil would very quickly be taken down into the soil itself by the action of the earthworms. He referred to them as nature's ploughs. So these here are the stalks of clematis, which have been pulled into the soil. It's very obvious. You get down on the soil surface itself and look horizontally across. You can see that the lawn is filled with small stalks pulled in vertically and sticking upwards. It's also not realised that in North America the earthworm in large areas became extinct due to the action of very heavy ice going down to the bedrock. And in fact it was the first settlers in America who returned earthworms as a species to many parts of North America. It had a dramatic effect upon the ecosystems because those trees and those woodlands and so on had all become used to having large levels of rotting leaves and other plants which were not being dragged into the soil because there were no earthworms. Now when earthworms were introduced, brought over either in pots of soil which had plants in them or even in the ballast that was used within the ships, had a dramatic effect upon the ecosystems of many of the woodlands, changing them entirely and quite detrimentally to their native state. The trees had grown used to having large levels of humus which were providing nutrients for them, and when the earthworms were there recycling them, then they no longer had that nutrient supply. Earthworms belong to the group of animals known as annelids. They're quite simple. They do have 5 pairs of hearts, and they have multiply duplicated sections of their body, each of which contains, for instance, kidneys, parts of the digestive system. They have a very small brain at the pointed end of their body. It's often thought that earthworms drown in wet weather, but actually, seeing as they breathe through their skin, they do tend to come to the surface and can move from one part of an area to another along the surface. Of course, this would better be at night, because they are a favourite food of birds such as thrushes. During long dry summers, if you dig down the soil, you'll find them sometimes wrapped up like a ball inside a chamber, trying to keep themselves as moist as possible until the rains come again. Earthworms have great powers of regeneration. For as long as the brain and the hearts are in the section that's cut off, say by a horse's hoof or a cow's hoof, then the rest of the body can often regenerate. Another unusual feature is that they are hermaphrodite, that is, they contain both the male and female gender. Although they do not, in fact, self-fertilize, they exchange with other earthworms and produce cocoons that are left in the soil and eventually hatch out. One of the distinctive features of earthworms is a structure often known as a saddle. That's the part responsible for producing the mucus that produces the cocoons in which the eggs are laid. Earthworms move through the soil by a combination of hydraulic changes in their body shape, that is, pushing a pointed end into the soil, which they can then expand. But they also have things called chetae, which are like very thick, very tough bristles that can be pushed into the soil or retracted from the soil. And a combination of that hydraulic movements and the movements of the chetae are able to drag the earthworm either down into the soil or to the surface. Or if you watch a bird struggling to pull one out, they can use it to anchor themselves as best they can in the soil.